Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, Brexit and the global economy. What we see right now is lots of money moving around the world, more than before. As the fallout continues from Britain's vote to leave the EU, we ask if it's just the beginning and if a knock-on recession is on the cards. Also this week, the man they call India's James Bond announces an unusual departure. He's not been your everyday Reserve Bank governor. So how will the Indian economy fare after Raghuram Rajan leaves the position? And from the cradle of innovation, my trip to Silicon Valley, California, and the 2016 Global Entrepreneurship Summit, and how garage entrepreneurs can become world dominators. So we're back on the trail of Brexit this week on Counting the Cost because the impact is becoming more and more apparent, and quite frankly, there's no telling where or when it might end. What we're looking at this week are the signs, the movement of money and assets, which all point to further trouble. Not all of it Brexit related, but a lot of it definitely triggered by the vote. Look at this. Gold has risen more than 25% this year. Not yet near its all-time record of $1,900 an ounce, but it is the classic safe haven commodity. Government bonds have attracted investment for the same reason, and we talked about this last week. Some investors seem happy to take tiny returns just to hold some stable government debt, a case of the return of their money being more important rather than the return on their money. That affects emerging markets, which can offer higher returns but more risk too. In a sign of the times, Premier Li Keqiang has already said it won't be easy for China to achieve its growth target of 6.7%. And with the US dollar rising more than 11% against the pound since the Brexit vote, and it's up against other currencies too, American products are becoming more expensive for foreign buyers. So we can see the signs. So too can the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, who this past week unveiled a plan to allow banks to release almost $200 billion in funds to lend to home buyers and businesses. But he also warned there's a limit to what his organisation can do to ease the economic uncertainty.
The UK has entered a period of uncertainty and significant economic adjustment. The efforts of the Bank of England will not be able to fully and immediately offset the market and economic volatility that can be expected while this adjustment proceeds. More fundamentally, the future potential of this economy and its implications for jobs, real wages and wealth are not the gifts of the Bank of England, but will be driven by major decisions made by others within the public and private sectors.
So let's get into it all now with our guest in London. We welcome back Russell Jones, a partner at the economics advisory firm Llewellyn Consulting. Russell, how are you feeling now? We're 2 weeks on from the Brexit vote. How do you feel things are settling? You know, is there any clarity, and perhaps more importantly, is there any confidence amongst the likes of you and the people you work with and deal with in London?
In many ways, I'm more worried by the current situation than I was back in 2008, actually. Back at that time, we knew the script. We were dealing with a financial sector crisis, and the macroeconomic policy response was fairly clear. Central banks had to bring down interest rates very sharply, and the taxpayer was going to have to pay a great deal of money to recapitalize the banking system. It was clear in many ways what had to be done. The current situation for the UK is a lot more complex than that. We have a much broader shock. It's a shock to our political system, it's a shock to our institutional architecture, and there is massive uncertainty. And not only that, we're also in a situation where the policy levers available are much smaller than they were back in 2008 and 2009. Interest rates are already close to zero. The government is dealing with a large budget deficit. So really, this is a much more uncertain and difficult time for the UK economy.
And for the global economy as well. I mean, what sort of strikes me is that we're in a period where a lot of money is on the move, you know, even more than usual. It's moving into gold, it's moving into government bonds, even though those aren't necessarily bringing very good returns. That's the uncertainty, isn't it? The fact that the money can't find a truly safe spot at the moment.
Absolutely right, yes. I mean, this has delivered a sense of shock, not just to the United Kingdom, but also to the European Union and more broadly than that. And at a time when financial markets and when confidence generally around the world was still fragile as a result of what had happened 7 or 8 years ago, people are understandably looking for safe havens, looking for stores of value that they can really depend on. And the net result is, as you suggested, a big flight to quality, a big movement into government bonds, and some selling off in riskier assets.
Who benefits then, Russell? I mean, on a simple level, it's a good time for anyone with US dollars because they're up about, 11% at the moment. But who benefits further than that? There's always a flip side.
Well, the good news is that governments can borrow at extraordinarily low rates of interest, and that means that the costs of servicing their debt are dramatically reduced. A lot of economists would also argue that this is a time when perhaps governments should use that very low level of interest rates to actually start spending more. Monetary policy is more or less exhausted around the world, so why shouldn't fiscal policy take some of the slack up? If the United States can borrow at less than 1.5% for 10 years, the Japanese can borrow at negative interest rates out for 20 years. Perhaps we should be using those extraordinary levels of interest to spend more money to sustain aggregate demand in the global economy.
Russell Jones, your perspective and time appreciated as always. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Russell did mention the United States there, and we also spoke earlier about the impact the higher dollar is having on American exports. But, there are deeper problems than that. Changes in technology, along with the effect of globalization, have eroded jobs in manufacturing and mining, the types of jobs many US communities have counted on for generations. Rob Reynolds has this report now from the state of Wyoming on how anger and anxiety among working class Americans is having an impact, especially in an election year.
Virgil Beaver spent decades mining coal for a living, but lately he's been spending his time at home.
There's nothing I can do about it. I get laid up. I mean, I had 20 years of a good run.
In April, Beaver's employer, the world's largest coal mining company, Peabody Energy, declared bankruptcy. About 500 miners in northeastern Wyoming were let go.
And I can't go out and find a job for $10 an hour to pay my bills. So my job market's kind of limited.
In Wright, Wyoming, population 2,000, just about every job is dependent on the mines. Many here blame the Obama administration and likely Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton for policies that encourage renewable energy like wind and solar at the expense of coal.
It's been really tough. There's been a lot of folks pack up and leave town. I'm afraid we'll see some businesses close, but hopefully we can try to survive the storm.
The storm has battered working-class Americans for years. More than 5 million mining and manufacturing jobs have disappeared since 2000. Analysts say the losses disproportionately hit workers in places like northeastern Wyoming, where the population is predominantly white.
If you look locationally across the U.S., in the least diverse places is where you see the most hollowed out middle class.
The steadily dwindling number of jobs in industries like mining and manufacturing is not only hurting vast numbers of working class people economically, it's also making them sicker. A government survey published in April showed a drop in life expectancy for working class whites for the first time in many decades. Researchers say the economic decline of working class whites spurs unhealthy behavior.
Suicide, opioid addiction, drug addiction. And if you look at that geographically, it's most concentrated in these areas I talked about, the sort of hollowed out, remote places.
White working class discontent has fueled the rise of Republican presumptive presidential nominee Donald Trump, who promises to tear up trade treaties. Like many white working class voters, Virgil Beaver has lost faith in the establishment.
Career politicians, they have a certain agenda that they're trying to meet. It's not helping the working class people.
Growing anxiety among working class people that will be felt at the polls in November.
And still ahead on Counting the Cost, whose garage is this and what was created in it? Come with me to California and the Global Entrepreneurial Summit in Silicon Valley, where we'll answer that and learn about how to get that next big thing off the ground. Right now, though, India and its Reserve Bank. You know, in uncertain times, central bankers have quite a role to play in keeping the economy on track. And India's Raghuram Rajan is regarded as one of the world's most impressive central bankers. But now he's leaving the role. What happens to India's economic path? And was Mr. Rajan as effective as his rock star status suggests? Faiz Jamil investigates for us.
It's time to do something different for the banker who warned of the looming financial crisis in 2008. Raghuram Rajan, governor of the Reserve Bank of India, will not be seeking another term when his tenure ends in September. Appointed by the previous government, he has been credited with keeping a steady hand on the economy, particularly on inflation.
Every government has just
A former official from the Reserve Bank and the IMF says Rajan arrived right when India needed him.
He came at a very difficult time, and one of his major achievements was indeed to stabilize the economy at that time and relatively quickly through a whole host of measures that he put in, which provided for financial stability to the country. The currency became stable. We very quickly regained credibility in international financial markets.
Since then, the financial sector has been relatively constant, with inflation staying in check. But he was also seen as clashing with the current government's economic plan, preferring to control inflation rather than lowering interest rates to boost spending in areas such as real estate and manufacturing. Earning the disapproval of some politicians who argue growth under Rajan has not translated into benefits expected by India's middle and lower classes.
Many felt that inflation could be kept down even without such a tight monetary policy which Mr. Rajan was pursuing. So there are two opinions. See, both may be right. Mr. Rajan may be right, and also those who wanted a higher rate of growth. And I think the bulk of the Indian middle class was impatient for that higher rate of growth.
Rajan leaves with his credibility intact, but perhaps his star image to some when he first arrived is not what it was. The focus is now on who will replace Rajan as RBI governor, and will his successor be someone with the credibility and clout to challenge the government and attract international confidence? More importantly, will they be someone who can effectively manage India's growth? For Counting the Cost, I'm Faiz Jamil in New Delhi.
Well, for some more analysis, we spoke to Rajiv Biswas, Asia-Pacific chief economist with IHS. Here he explains how the governor's legacy will be seen and the difficulty in finding a replacement.
I think there is a great deal of respect for what he has accomplished at the central bank. He's achieved many things. Certainly one of the biggest achievements is keeping the currency relatively stable and rebuilding foreign exchange reserves with quite capable management of the foreign exchange reserves. On the monetary policy side, the central bank has made considerable progress by now targeting consumer price inflation instead of wholesale price inflation as they used to do, and by creating an inflation target. And I think all of those things are big achievements. And of course, the biggest achievement, although it has more to do with falling oil prices probably than skillful governorship, is that inflation has come down considerably under his tenure. So from that point of view, he's had a wonderful track record in the 3 years of office. And now, of course, it's a great loss for India as a nation to have such a capable central bank governor stepping down relatively early. I think certainly the financial markets globally would have welcomed a second term under Governor Rajan.
Now, for the rest of the program this week, we're going to talk entrepreneurship. If you follow me at all on social media, you will have seen a couple of weeks ago I was in California for the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. A great chance to meet some really interesting people and to find out how they got their next big idea off the ground. So welcome to Palo Alto, California, everyone. Stanford University, which is hosting the 2016 Global Entrepreneurship Summit. Now into its 7th year. Launched by President Obama back in 2010 and has been all over the world since then, but now really coming back to what you might call its spiritual home in Silicon Valley. We're going to meet all sorts of people, entrepreneurs, investors throughout the course of the show. I've got Tarek Bazley to help us do that as well. He's our science and technology editor. I mean, from meeting people already and having a look around, Tarek, what type of thing can we expect to see?
Well, this, Kamal, is an extraordinary network event for the startup community. We've got hundreds, literally over 700 young entrepreneurs, all of them with some very smart ideas of how to change the world, how to make money along the way. And they've got this opportunity to network with investors, sometimes from very large investment funds that are looking for the next great thing. What they've set up is a 3 days of meetings, sometimes one-on-one meetings between these two groups, sometimes competitions. For example, they've got this pitching competition, a kind of 3-minute opportunity for them to pitch their ideas to the investors.
Speed dating, basically.
Exactly, speed dating of the business world. And what we've seen at these sessions is some extraordinary really good ideas from all over the world, from Kenya, from Thailand, and an amazing response actually from the investor community. Very positive feedback for a lot of these young people.
Brilliant stuff. Well, okay, off you go. Find the next big thing for us and bring it back for Counting the Cost. We're going to have a look now just though at one of Tarek's reports from the early stages of the Entrepreneurship Summit and see how it all started out.
So what is it like coming back? It's a long way from Accra in Ghana to Palo Alto, California. But for Michael Amankwa, the Global Entrepreneurship Summit is a rare opportunity to meet investors with the power and money to scale up his banking software business.
Having a dream such as being able to bank every African, that is providing financial services to them and providing insurance services to them, that's to 1 billion people. You're talking about, look, a service that requires a lot of critical partners, very strategic partners, which also includes not just technology partners, but also investors and the like, because it's going to take a lot of money to make this happen.
One part of the event is a speed pitching contest, a 3-minute opportunity to impress a panel of industry experts. $65,000 is up for grabs, along with a chance to catch the eye of a potential investor. The winner is a project to bring a new nutrient-rich and more profitable rice variety to market.
Our company is a social enterprise from Thailand, and we're working, days and nights to really find solution to the poverty of these farmers that are only earning, 40 cents per day. We need the support, financially, knowledge, all we can get, and you have an incredible model in the Western world of how to scale a business, where we come from, most businesses just stay very small.
Many of the world's largest startup investors are here at this event. When it comes to innovative ideas, there are plenty of those as well. The question is, who benefits most? Is it the young entrepreneurs who take to the stage to try and find funding for their projects, or the investors who want to see their money back with the ideas that will shape the future?
We like to think that everyone stands to benefit from the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. Investors are making great contacts. The entrepreneurs are developing their own networks to improve their own communities, because we're committed to exporting the idea of entrepreneurship and the American approach to it. We think of it as a purely American spirit that we want to see globalized.
The 3-day event includes numerous talks, workshops and panel discussions. In a world where some companies are more valuable and influential than nations, maybe it's here the future will be shaped.
One of the things that I think we also have to focus on as we think about the opportunity that's here is how we make sure that in my mind, I think that the talent is evenly spread around the world, but I think opportunity is not spread out evenly around the world. And so to that extent, I think that I feel an obligation to be able to say to people, how do we have inclusive entrepreneurship? How do we bring our youth and our women into the game? When here in Silicon Valley, we also have to challenge ourselves, and we have to ask ourselves, why is it that 2/3 of venture capital is coming from 3 states and only going to 25 zip codes? And of that, only about 6% is going to women. We have to also talk about change.
Well, why is that? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think because people see they've had success, and so now they have revenue that they can invest, and they think that success is something that looks like themselves. And we have to challenge that notion.
So like feeds like.
Success breeds success, right? And so if I did it and this is who I am, it must be that I need to find somebody like me to do it again. And what we have to say is...
Change that then.
We have to change that. We have to say, do you know that there may be pain points that you would not recognize that I would experience in a very different way, and those are big, unfettered opportunities that we have to pursue. So I think we have to challenge ourselves. And what I loved about this morning's session was that they all talked about having an impact. They talked about change, and they talked about more inclusive entrepreneurship. That's the message that I hope really resonates as we leave from here, and that it becomes change for good. We have to ask the industry that knows how to disrupt themselves.
Do you think, just a final thought, that this spirit can carry on? Because I was saying this in an earlier interview, that social responsibility, making a difference, this is clearly very important to young entrepreneurs, particularly now. But they can't do that unless their business is successful, unless they make money. So there has to be that capitalist element there, that drive to make money. Otherwise, the social responsibility will fall away, it'll die away.
I think you're spot on. The idea that these two have to be at odds is a myth. I think that when you have impact in the community and you're having an impact in creating change, I think that from that comes more loyalty. People now want the narrative. They want to know that what they're doing, what they're buying has an impact in their lives. And so I really do believe that those that reach forward and say, I'm here to do something good and profit will be my reward, versus business is business, that is gone. The best way to make money is to make sure that you're really addressing a pain point for others.
So we've broken away from the summit just for a little bit, and we've come about 20 minutes down the road to the city of Los Altos. I think you can safely say this is your average suburban American street. It's called Crist Drive, Los Altos. And that house over there, that is number 2066 Crist Drive. And it's in that, well, I would say garage, I think Americans would say garage, in that garage that Steve Jobs founded the company that we now know as Apple. It happened in there. Well, actually, to be fair, there's a little bit of urban myth going on here. Steve Wozniak, who co-founded Apple, has subsequently said, well, no actual design went on there. This was more like an assembly area. They put the computers together there and then took them off to the store to be sold. So Apple maybe wasn't technically founded there, but even he concedes that the symbolism of such a place is very important to the company. And Los Altos as a city agrees it actually turned 2066 Crist Drive into a historical site 3 years ago. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Well, because as much as that garage is a symbol of Apple as a company, the whole idea of the garage entrepreneur, the young man or woman who works behind those doors and turns ideas into reality, that is a symbol of Silicon Valley and the way it's built itself up into the behemoth that it is now. Of course, we're in 2016 now. It's a very, very different environment. And I sort of started to wonder, well, does the garage entrepreneur still exist? Do they still sit behind those doors and make things happen out of nowhere? Or is it a completely different playing field? Well, we went to a networking event, an entrepreneurs networking event up in San Francisco, just to talk to a few of these such entrepreneurs to find out how the business works now.
There's all types of virtual garages now. So an event like this is a place for, very similar group of people that have founders' experiences, founders' backgrounds to come together. But I think the new garage is the co-working spaces, the WeWorks, the Galvanizes, the places where you rent a desk for $400 a month and get together and be around other kind of scrappy entrepreneurs brainstorming. A lot of teams form there. I think that's kind of the future garage.
Every new construction in San Francisco must have a certain amount of square footage based on the square footage of the building. They must have a certain amount of square footage devoted to public open space. And so LinkedIn has basically their whole first floor of their new building, which is just open, empty tables where you can go and sit around.
The way that the global economy is evolving, everybody can be anywhere and be interacting with whoever they need to be. And with all of the tools that you have for productivity, it makes it very easy to stay on top of your business while you're anywhere.
I had a startup as well in the past, but actually right now I work in a corporate environment. So until the idea actually takes off, that's where I'll actually know. So it's great having that income that's still coming in unless you have the opportunity to just concentrate 100%.
I think that's why innovation is so important, right? Because it's a very competitive marketplace. So people need to find the best solution and the best solution fast. And the solution that actually serves people's needs, because if you serve people's needs, then you can make money from that, right? People don't buy or spend money on something they don't need.
It's never been harder to hire than this year, and I've said that every previous year all the way back to 2005. So, competition, nobody is stopping Google or Apple or any of these companies. They'll take any talent, and so the startup world is competing for that talent. So there's, maybe there was a slight blip on the map where we didn't get paid by customers for an extra few months, and you make it through that, and life moves on, and you're back in a bubble. So.
Just some of the people I met in California there. Part 2, including socially responsible entrepreneurism and an 11-year-old boy who's designed 4 smartphone apps, is coming up next week. In the meantime, there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our page with individual reports, links and entire episodes to catch up on. You can also get in touch with us. You can tweet me at KamalAJE. Do use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or just drop us an email. It is countingthecost@aljazeera.net. That is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.